shiny metal and reflective surfaces. Glossy objects, like those made from glass and metal, can be challenging to photograph. Their surfaces naturally reflect light, which creates glare when the object isn't photographed properly. By using the appropriate lighting, a good backdrop, and the right camera settings, you can take good pictures of shiny, glossy objects without any unwanted reflections. So one of the problems that you're going to encounter, specifically in product photography, is how to deal with shiny metals and reflective surfaces. So we're going to learn how to hopefully prevent shiny metal or any other shiny surface from producing a glare in your camera lens. And it's all about the angles. It's called the angle of incidence. And what the statement says is the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. So you discover how light always bounces off of shiny objects at the same angle in that it hit. So think about our bouncy ball exercise that we just did. When you bounce a ball, it bounces in the opposite direction at the same angle that you bounced to hit the surface. So the angle of incidence is very similar to, say, bouncing a ball on a surface. So here you can see just in a little bit more detail to hopefully help you understand how that light reflects off of surfaces. Of course, there's a lot of math and physics that can go into this. We're not going to go into it in great detail, but you just need to understand, number one, what that angle of incidence is, how light reflects off of surfaces, and how you can either move the light or change position of the object to force the light to reflect away from the lens. Determining the angle of reflection. We know every glossy object reflects light in a certain direction. The direction that the reflected light travels depends on the location of the light source and, of course, the shape of the object that you are taking a picture of. So if you know how the object reflects light, you can then, number one, position your camera, or number two, position the light source, or the third option would be take the object and make sure that that angle that you're taking the photo of along with the light prevents that specific light source from bouncing off the object and traveling back to the camera lens. You don't want the light to be positioned where it's bouncing off of the surface of your object and straight back into your camera lens. So you have to determine how the light is being reflected. And to do that, it's going to be a little bit of experimentation. After you understand how that light works, it's going to be easier. So at first, a little bit more difficult, but as you work with it, you'll understand it a bit better. You're going to look at how does that light reflect off of the object, and then pointing the light to make sure that it doesn't go back right to you in the camera. So you need to experiment a little bit. To determine how that light is being reflected, you need to point the light at the object that you are taking a photo of and look for how that surface is reflecting the light and where that light is going. To do that, it's good to have some extra surfaces, backdrops around your object to see that reflective light. Where is that reflective light being displayed? If there aren't any nearby surfaces, you don't have anything that you can bounce it out, get some white cards, get some just pieces of paper, and look at different locations around the object to see where indeed that reflective light is hitting. Diffusing the light. So you can diffuse the lighting. If you point light directly at a glossy object or a shiny object, a highly reflective object, that light will be reflected and, like we say, picked up by the camera, creating a glare, and we do not want that. So you need to decrease or diffuse the lighting. To decrease the glare, easy way to diffuse it is just place a tissue paper between the object being photographed and the light source. Now be careful, because you don't want to place tissue paper right on top of your light, because it will burn and you'll start a fire, and that's not good. So you want to use something that will take that strong light source and sort of disperse it. Now, if you don't have tissue paper, a thin sheet of fabric might work. You can experiment with different materials, but again, don't put it right on the light because it will get hot. Lights are hot, they will burn it. But a way that you can take that strong light source and just disperse it. There are a lot of different materials out there that will do that for you. Choosing an appropriate backdrop. Of course, glossy objects reflect the colors and patterns of surrounding objects. Number one, if you just look in a mirror, you see that. We reflect the colors and the patterns. That will be a consideration in your photo as well. So before taking a photo of a shiny reflective object, examine that object to see what exactly is being reflected. What are you picking up on? If it's reflecting too many external colors, patterns, surroundings, then position it away from the background elements so that that glossy object is away from those items that it's picking up and reflecting. Or you can use a neutral backdrop, like a white table, a white wall, a solid color. Many times you will see in photography of highly reflective surfaces, you'll see the image of the photographer, or you'll see bystanders or the objects in the studio that were off to the side. So be cautious, be aware. You're not just looking at that object in a narrow way. You're looking broadly at what you are photographing and every single piece that's part of that picture. Adjusting the camera settings, you might have to go and play with your settings. Now, if the photo is too bright or too dark, of course, we know that you're going to have to probably manually adjust your camera shutter speed or the aperture. Remember, the shutter speed measured in seconds or fractions of a second, and the aperture is measured in f-stops. And both of those items determine how much light enters the camera. We've had lessons talking about exposure. We've talked specifically about shutter speed and specifically about aperture. So you should understand how those items work. If the photo is too dark, that means there's not enough light hitting it. So you either need to decrease the shutter speed, slow the shutter speed down so the shutter speed stays open, or increase the aperture so the aperture opens wider. If the photo is too bright, then you need to increase the shutter speed so that the photo snaps quicker. The shutter speed opens and closes much faster, letting less light in, or decrease the aperture so that aperture opening is smaller, again, letting less light in. So understand if the photo is too dark or if the photo is too bright, what you have to do. Utilizing white cards or foam core around the object. Again, if that glossy or shiny reflective object looks dull in the photo, you can use white foam cards. You can use actually just white paper presentation boards that are white around the object. So the object is going to then reflect the white color, thus making it look brighter. So if it looks really dull and really plain, get some bright surfaces around that the light bounces within, and that will brighten up your object. Make sure, of course, that you're not going overboard and making it too harsh, too bright. What happens, hopefully, if you play with this a bit, is that the photo will bring out more of the object's details. So with that brighter, lit up object, you're going to see more of those details. All right, so a simple white foam core board, like I said, even a single piece of paper will help you do this. Here's some overall tips for taking photos of shiny metal or other reflective surfaces. Of course, the lighting is the key here. You want to obviously turn off your flash. We talk about that. Try not to use your flash. Instead, find another external light source, a lamp. Use it at a lower angle. The angle of light, bring it down so it's not directly on top of your object, but coming from the side or even a little bit below. So those angles are important. Light bounces off of a shiny surface at the angle it is hit at. That's that angle of reflection or the angle of incidence. So you have your incident ray and your reflected ray. Make sure that you try to separate the object from the background, and you can do that hopefully by using just a single light. A tip that you should always remember is to use a tripod. That is the stability control. And of course, the settings on your camera, if you need to use a slow shutter speed, or if your photos are turning out blurry, then you need to put your camera on a tripod, because that tripod really does keep the camera steady. It decreases the risk of blur. If you're taking photos of the object from below at a very low angle or from above at a high angle, you want to use a tripod with a tilting camera mount. Brighten up darker areas of the object using simple white foam core boards. This helps to bounce the light around the lighter surfaces, thus bringing up more detail in your objects. The key things here, if I were to narrow it down just to 2, avoid ugly reflections and avoid glare on your camera lens. So it does take some experimentation to do this. Make sure that you're looking at all the details in your photo, that you're not just blindly looking at the object. You look at what's in the object, what's in the reflections, what's in the highlights, and make sure that it is a clean, good photo.